A couple of special thanks. The music that you're going to hear tonight is stuff that you can go to cgmusic.net and listen to in the archives. If some of you probably have done that. The guy who put the tracks together that are there is Marcel Gonzalez. Marcel showed up at a pinball expo in Chicago. God, I'm going to say 18 years ago, a long time ago. 18, maybe 15, 16 years ago, something like that, with CDs of the music of the games that he loved. And he'd done some really cool things. And as you'll hear tonight, I hope, he had taken the System 11 test board and plugged EPROMs into it and fired off sound calls at that thing and recorded the output, pretty much as directly as you could. Sound effects, music tracks, speech callouts, basically anything that would make 0 to FF. Came out of the speakers, and recorded it all and brought it into a digital audio workstation and assembled a hearing of the audio that the game played. And he did it in such an artful way, and added a couple of really interesting touches that I really like a lot. Basically, it's made it possible for me to kind of like remember and have you guys still kind of remember what this work is like. And I have to stress that you can't go to a game and play it and hear what he's done. This is actually like a way to hear the soundtrack in a more pristine way than the game would ever allow you to do, unless you had some kind of like massive, 3,000 watt system that you were able to completely overpower the mechanical sound of a pinball game as you're playing it. Then you might be able to get to the point where you're hearing something like what he's doing, but all the mechanical noises are gone, and it's just the Yamaha chip that made the sounds, and the little one-hand arm drummer that we had. It's our 8 channels of Yamaha and 1 arm of drums, and that's what we had, right? So anyway, that's Marcel, and so I always have to say thank you to Marcel whenever I do one of these things. Nick Widmont, you're going to see later. You're going to see pictures of the games that I have. I have a box full of promo pics from Williams Bally Midway days, so it's just like the game itself on a totally white background. And I went into work the other day, and I'm just going to drop these slides in, and somebody said, you ought to like make those things transparent. I'm like, I'm a sound guy, how do I do that? And Nick Widmont, I'm happy to say, is a wonderful video artist at Zynga Chicago, and he took all of my pictures and removed the white and gave me transparent background. So thank you very much, Nick. So this is what we're going to do. I sort of said, talked about this slide before, how we got there. We're going to do a little bit of we had an honorable pre-mention just a minute ago when we were doing the sound test. There's a couple of games that people did vote for, but that didn't really kind of like even get into the honorable mention and didn't make it into the top 10 really. But they were good choices, and they were cool games. And Dr. Dude was one of them. And the particular clip that I played earlier. There's a certain style of music that I got to sort of like embrace and really push in my career as a Williams pinball sound guy, and that is air guitar tracks. Okay, so that when I sit around going wow like this and do do all that kind of crazy stuff, I got to say, okay, I know I can't play that. I know probably Eddie Van Halen can't play that, but my Yamaha chip can play it. And if I stand there and go and my Yamaha chip goes, wow, and it's going to work. It's a thing, right? So what you actually heard, the Dr. Dude double jackpot clip that you heard earlier, that's actually like, to me, that's the pinnacle, that's the peak air guitar track ever. And so for air guitar, Dr. Dude was the shit, man. It was just, that was the way that it went. So that's kind of like an honorable pre-mention, right? The other thing that you heard a minute ago came from Pinbot, which we'll talk about that later, but the track that you heard was not my track. It was a track written by my colleague Bill Parad, who was how I heard about the job at Williams in the first place in 1986, and he was there, he was working there. He wrote the basic operating system that was the Yamaha operating system that played all of this stuff. And he was also, he was something of a composer, and he wrote this really crazy track as a first pass tune for Pinbot when it first came out. And Ken Fidesna and Joe Dillon, the head of sales, walked into his office, and we were all kind of like in his office. And I had been on the job for maybe 4 months. I had done the Road Kings soundtrack, and I guess we were working on Joust 2 or something like that. And Bill was going to go do Pinbot, and So he had written this track, and it is a wild, incredible track. There's all kinds of just insane things going on in it. Pinball was a real revolution, a really huge thing for us, which we'll talk about in a minute a little bit more. But Dylan walked into his office and he goes, "I'm in space, but I'm not in deep space." This is Joe. You know, Joe was a crazy guy, salesman, and everybody's like, "Wow, okay," you know. And Bill was like, "Okay, well, you know, think about that." And everybody walked out of the office. He goes, "Deep space? What the fuck is deep space?" I don't know, maybe something more kind of like droney, and you know. And he goes, "You want to try something?" And so you know, you're going to hear later what I tried, and then we kind of went that way. But his tune is the high score today tune. So when you get your initials, when you enter your initials on Pinball, you're listening to Bill Perot's track. It's an immortal track. It's an awesome, awesome track. And Bill's an awesome guy. He's a great, great guy. Okay, so those are my sort of like, you know, pre-mentions. So what I've got going on here is I've got, we're going to do, there's 3 honorable mentions that didn't make the top 5, but I still had to have them in this deck because I have a story to tell about it. Okay, so that's really why. And so what I've got here is I've got a, you know, I think maybe you can see that there's a little sound icon there, and I think that when I hit this button, you're going to hear the track that I want you to hear. And then I'll hit another button, and then you'll see the game. But I'm going to delay between those two things so that you can sort of like have some sense. And if you know the work, you're going to kind of know, and I'll see the looks of recognition. But do me a favor and don't shout out, just in case, right? And we'll just, you know, we'll have a little fun with it. Okay, if that's okay. So let's, you know, fingers crossed, everybody.
Get that jackpot. Fire at will. Awesome.
We can listen for a couple seconds there. Let this play. This is the first tune that only I wrote, that Steve Ritchie didn't have a hand in writing. so I'm starting here. It's other stuff. The other tracks of the tune are cool and everything like that. But this, I wrote this one. He didn't have anything to do with it. So, I have to include that slide, and I have to include that game for 2 main reasons. One is that Steve is speaking next, and I had to have a Steve game on the list, you know. And it turns out that you know, that my work, that the places where I got to like sort of like hit my peak happened just randomly not to happen on Steve's games. You know, there are other games that I've done that I feel like you know, that for whatever reason it worked out. I did better. The game did better. Everything about it was like a more positive experience. This was the best collaboration that I had with Steve. It was a marvelous, marvelous game. No regrets at all. Steve's a great guitarist. I love working with him. I'll work with him again in a heartbeat. You know, and we've done, you know, since this game we've done several things, but this had to be, the main reason that this slide is here is so I can tell you my fuck you asshole story. And I don't know whether people know the fuck you asshole story, but I have recorded audio proof that Arnold Schwarzenegger said fuck you asshole directly to me. And now I'm going to tell you that story. So we're doing this game, and we're still early days with licensed games, right? So how do you do a licensed game? You know, you get a bunch of images, and you get a bunch of, you maybe get some story and script and stuff like that, and you know what the movie's going to be about. So we're doing all this stuff, and we need somebody from the license to do some voiceover for us. And they're like, well, what do you need us to do? And we said, well, we need stuff like get the jackpot and get the extra ball and stuff like that. And they're like, well, wait, so you want Arnold as the Terminator to say, get the extra ball? What does that even sound like? And I go, I don't know, get the extra ball or something like that, right? And everybody's like, man, I don't know, that seems weird. And somebody at Carolco, the movie production company, goes, could you find a sound-alike and have him record the script that you have in mind, or some part of the script that you have in mind? And we're like, okay. So I call up a couple of voiceover, you know, shops in Chicago, and I go, I'm looking for an Arnold, you know, I'm looking for a Terminator. And And they go, oh, great, no problem. We'll have somebody, this is like Friday at 5 o'clock, I'm calling them up. And so, on Saturday at 9 o'clock, they waited till 9, which is pretty nice. My phone rings. And, hello, and hello, Mr. Granner. This is Arnold. And I could tell that it wasn't really Arnold, but that was more or less what it sounded like. He's talking like this. Hello, this is Arnold. This is the Terminator. So I'm like, really great. Well, say, get the extra ball. And they went, get the extra ball. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay, well, cool. Here, say, and I had a couple of other lines. They would say a couple of other lines, and I would say, okay, thanks. Well, thanks. Taking their names, making a little note, hang up, rings again. Hello, Mr. Granner, it's Arnold. And so between 9 and 9:15 in the morning that morning, I got 4 phone calls. 2 of them I had on call waiting at one point, and I had 2 guys going, just a minute, I got Arnold on the other line. Hello, Mr. Granner. Okay, get the extra ball. Get the extra ball. And so this is going on, and it's so weird. And finally, I picked a guy. The guy that we picked was Fred Young, and that was the first thing that Fred Young ever did for us. And he then, the rest for him is history. He did, game after game after game for Stern. He did, all through the '90s. He was doing tons and tons of work for them. Unbelievable, man of 1,000 voices, super cool guy. And he's going, get the extra ball. Oh, isn't that great? Because he cracked himself up all the time. It's the best thing about Fred. So we're like, okay, so Fred, come into the studio and record this thing. We had, I don't know, we had him do just 10 or 12 lines or something like that. And so he records the script, and and I'm listening. Get the extra ball. Get the extra ball. It's like, God, there's something about that just I know they're gonna hate this. They're just gonna, the movie people are gonna hate this. Arnold's gonna hate this. And we're like, okay, well, here's our, this is what we're talking about. This is what we have in mind, And so we send it off. 2 days later, we get back. We have bad news, guys. Not only is Arnold not gonna do it, you can't hire a sound alike to do it. And we're sitting in Roger Sharp's office, and Steve goes, if we don't have the Terminator's voice in the game, why are we doing this again? That was pretty much his reaction. And I'm like, yeah, I'm kind of with him, It's like, I'm not sure what to do at that point, or what, how behind my back can I tie 2 hands, So Roger goes, let me, give me the weekend and give me something to work on. So we come back the next, Monday or whatever, and Roger's like, okay, what's his name? Casals got Arnold out to his ranch and talked him down off the cliff, and basically he's got Arnold's consent to do this thing. He's going to do it. But we're going to do it in his trailer in between sessions, because the movie was being shot right at that time, So we're going to do it in his trailer in between sessions. I'm like, great, I'm going to the set. He goes, no. We're going to have a real sound guy, do it. And the guy who did it was Lee Orloff. He was the sound director for the film. And, there was $30,000 worth of microphones and, this incredibly fancy setup that they did put up together to do this session. And they delivered to me a DAT tape with my script. Right, with our script. And so we got this DAT tape, and we're coming down, and we drop it into the studio, and the whole group team is in the studio. We're listening to this thing, and it sounds perfect. Everything's great. It's like, oh my God, this is great. And we get the extra ball, and he goes, get the extra ball. And we're like, my God, Fred, you nailed it. We all nailed it. It all sounded exactly like it was going to sound. We just didn't know that was what Arnold was going to sound like. Well, it turns out that it's really easy to do a Terminator voice. Get the extra ball. That's really is exactly what it is. You guys could all do it yourselves. It would have been fine. Anyway, so he goes through and he reads the whole script, and Lee Orloff is amazing. He's going, oh, wait, there was a truck. I'm like, there was? And I rolled it back and turned it way up. Fuck, there was a truck. I never would have heard that. I'm like, great, thank you, Lee. Gets through the whole script. Everything's great, beautiful. Okay, and Lee goes, so anything else? And Arnold goes, yeah. And he drops out of character completely, and he goes, fuck you, asshole. And we all just went, yes! And I don't know how many people have a T3, a T2. Got a T2? You have the fuck you asshole ROMs? You don't? Oh my God, see me afterwards. You're like the first guy that I've met that doesn't, I figured that everybody had that. It's a really cool thing. Anyway, so that's my fuck you asshole story. So just had, I had to tell that story. It's a good story. Okay, so that was the, that was honorable mention number 1. This one isn't going to surprise anybody, I don't think, other than that it's only honorable mention. played that version of that theme because it was only at that moment where we finally got to the point where, and not to take anything away from the dozens of other magic moments in that soundtrack, wonderful, wonderful soundtrack for Addams Family. That was the place where we sort of broke through and somebody said, oh, we should do something that's sort of like Caribbean, you know, wouldn't that be fun? You know, and it's like, oh, we could totally do that. It took me like an hour to put that together. There was like no time at all. And everybody was like, oh, perfect. And it was that at that moment that we all started to really like fall in love with it. Before that, it was kind of weird, and there was all these modes, and it's like, you know, there was so much going on. The Addams Family certainly at the time was my best soundtrack. And I would never have not voted it in the top 5 myself. It was never my favorite soundtrack. And so the fact that it didn't make the top 5 here was not something that I was willing to put my finger on the scale about. But, so it didn't. This was actually number 6. So missed by 1 vote to make the top 5. But it's a really remarkable, as everybody knows, it's a remarkable game. And the soundtrack has an incredible depth to it. And we made significant strides in what the shape of a modern pinball soundtrack was by introducing this whole notion of modes and what a mode has to, how you have to introduce a mode in sound and how you have to then conclude it. So you have this welcome moment and you have a summary moment or something like that. And that structure and how much time each one of those parts of the presentation takes, that's my job. That was the job that I had to solve. And you know, over and over again, still to this day, as the audio director for a social game company, I'm still solving that problem every day. That's the problem that I and my guys have to solve. So Addams Family, super cool game, didn't make the top 5. So this next one, go. Just gonna let that play while I get myself some water. That was Deep Space, right? I get emotional about this. This is the most important game that we've ever made. This game is Python's gift to us. This is the game where we learned that our job in making games is to bring a machine to life. And that's what this game is about. It's a machine coming to life. It was a game that was made to be the thing that is in fact the most important thing about it, an interactive game, an interactive amusement game. That's what we do. We bring a machine to life. Every game that you have on your pocket is a machine. It's a little computer program, and if you like it, it's because somebody programmed it and somebody created art and sound and everything for it and made choreography that made you go, oh damn, that thing is alive. And that's what this game was. It was the first one. And that was Python. That was his gift to us. So we really miss you, man. Anyway, thank you. That's why I had to share that one. For some reason, I always choke up when I tell that story. I have a regret in my life. The last time I saw him, I walked away from a conversation. He was going, and Chris, one more thing. And I'm like, I couldn't take one more thing from him. He was a really infuriating guy. But Yeah, he moved the needle in our industry maybe more than anybody did. So this one's for you, man. So those were my honorable mentions, as much honor as I can bring. Thank you for your indulgence. So this is number 5.
You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
So, really, you know, the stories one could tell about Twilight Zone, obviously, is that it was originally intended to be the first DCS game. Didn't work out because the hardware and software weren't ready. We had done a bunch of work on it already. I had written a bunch of the music, including that piece, for my synthesizer studio, MIDI studio, and you know, recently, thanks to Brendan Bailey, who's here tonight, we made a presentation a couple of years ago in Chicago where I dug up that DAT tape and we put it out there, and now there are, you know, I think you can get a, you know, what's the guy's name? Pin Sound, Nicholas Pin Sound, is that what it's called? You can get a Pin Sound board with those sounds in it, so if you have a Pin Sound board for your Twilight, you can hear the original stuff. To be perfectly honest, I think of anything that comes out of my MIDI studio now, I judge it on standards that are more appropriate for MIDI studios to be judged on. And I listened to that stuff, which I made in 1992 and 1993, and went, yeah, God, that really isn't, you know, it sounds kind of like cheesy Yamaha synth music written for slightly better synthesizers. And so I don't, it's not my favorite thing anymore. For a long time, this stuff, all the stuff that we ended up having to rush to get together to get the game out in time after we had bailed and decided to just make it with the old hardware, was stuff that I just I kind of loathed. I didn't like it at all. It was like, oh man, this is not nearly as cool as it was. But then after pulling it together and pulling out all the tricks that we kind of knew about how to make a Yamaha soundtrack, it turns out that it's probably top 2 or 3 maybe of all the soundtracks that I've ever done. It's an amazing body of work. There's so much stuff there. We whipped it out in no time at all. I mean, it was all written already. All I kind of had to do was transcribe it. But so it turns out that we did a really good job. And over the years, it's really grown on me. And now I actually like the Yamaha version better than my early synth version. So now whenever I present Twilight Zone, I'm always presenting this version. So yeah, that's the thing. Okay, so number 4, well, you're about to hear the perfect melody. Pick drop. It's just so great. You just can't believe how good a pull-off factory can sound when 49 games on Berlin Test are all lined up playing that song. That was basically, life didn't get any better than that for me. This has always been my favorite. That tune is my favorite tune that I've ever written for games. It was another Python game. It was a silly thing that was originally going to be called Super Grand Prix. That was the idea. It was going to be a racing game, and it was the figure-8 ramps were going to be like this big fancy racetrack thing, you know. And when somebody said, "Oh, we're going to," Python came in and he said, "That's a terrible idea. It's a shit idea. We need to do something more interesting. It's got to be more human. It's got to be more right." So we get, so what do we get? We get Santa Claus, we get Pinball, we get Dracula. It's way more human because we brought Pinball to life before, so you know, so this is the same story. We keep on telling the same story. Anyway, that was Taxi, and it was a magical game. It was, you know, it was certainly Mark's first big real breakout game, and I'm really proud to have worked on it. It's also kind of like, you know, it has a vague sort of reminiscence of Little Feat and stuff like that, and at the time that was totally my favorite band, and that's what, you know, kind of stuff that I liked. So this was the first game that I did where there was nothing about what I was doing where I was faking it, and so that's why it's important to me. Came out number 4. I would have probably put it number 2. So number 3, yeah. More air guitar. This is dueling slide air guitars. Originally written for Dr. Dude. Dennis didn't like it. He didn't like it, and I have this thing that I do with designers where I go, live with it for a week, and almost without fail, they've forgotten that they didn't like it. In a week, they've forgotten, and it's like I sort of got away with it or something like that. Dennis, he goes, I don't like it in a week. I don't like it. Take it out. I'm like, wow, okay. I can't remember even what it was like for one of the first modes, one of the first like single ball modes of the game. I can't remember even which one it was. It was like party, something personality, not magnetic person. It wasn't that one. It was the part. What are the 3 characteristics? The heart. It was the heart. It was the heart. Yeah, yeah. So anyway, so that was for Dr. Dude. It reappears as the end of your initials tune for Whitewater. Whitewater was important though, and it would have made my list because of the main tune. That main tune has 9 stages for the 9 stages of the river, and we managed to do something that would be very hard to do now, that you don't have a synthesizer making live music, and that is start playing something and then play it again with adding a bass and then add another synth and then add a guitar and then add a second guitar, you know. And so we did that, and it was easy to do with the synthesizer. It would have been very hard and very memory intensive to do if we'd had to track out each one of those things individually. So that was important for that way too. And it was really cool. It was like sort of like my Bruce Hornsby period. So everybody should have one of those. If you're a composer, you should have a Bruce Hornsby period. Okay, there's nothing else to say about this. I keep on using high score to date tunes. Sorry. By the time I get to there in the project where I'm like really on a roll, I really got it going. Fishtails was the next game that I was going to do that I didn't have to fake, because it was like, oh, we're doing a bluegrass game, you know, we're doing a fishing game. It's going to be something country, and I'm kind of a country boy from the western shore of the Michigan Sea, but whatever, you know, it's still, you know, I love bluegrass, and that was what that music was. Except when I got there, it just seemed like, you know, we'd gotten into that whole deep sea fishing thing, and it was like, oh, we got to do something tropical. So that was that whole thing. But it was like fishing, really. You sit on the bank under a tree with your pole hanging in the water, and nothing happens for 3 hours. That's fishing for me. And then I walk into Mark's office, and I see on a you know, like some little drawing of a playfield or something like that, this little circle indicating a light, and underneath the light it says "Stretch truth when lit." I'm like, oh, it's not about fishing, it's about lying. Now we can do something with that, right? So Fishtails said, of course, you would not believe it was this big, right? Or, it was this big, man, I'm not kidding, fuck! We had to cut the end of that one, but that was our friend here doing that voice. And George Petro got to go, it was this big, it was, right? And I said something like, I tell you it was this big. And so we did all of that stuff, and that was what the game really was about, of course. So that was pretty fun. Fun game, and is actually my favorite game. That's my favorite game. I just love that game so much. Those boat ramps, oh, it's just magic. And so number one, this was your pick for number one. It would have made my top 5, but I didn't have it at number 1. But here it is.
Hey, too big here. Hey, stop running around. The fun house is cool. Hey, stop it. Go ahead, try it out. This is really starting to annoy me.
So there isn't really much to say about Funhouse. It was a game that came along at a moment where we really needed a home run, and we got a home run. The best story about Funhouse that you can tell is that the Rudy head was probably, what would you say, $100 mechanism or something like that, that appeared on the original bill of sale as a $35 mechanism. Okay, and even with a $35 Rudy head, which was never going to work. Okay, but they managed to hold 6 together with bag bomb and duct tape or something like that. Even with that, the bill of materials was already like $100 higher than anybody had ever, And so the whole conceit about Funhouse was we'd been making games quicker and cheaper and less interesting, incrementally quicker and cheaper and less interesting for about 3 or 4 or 5 games in a row. And our sales were doing nothing. We were just doing nothing. We were stuck in this quagmire of 1988, 89, just the beginning of 1990, And even games like Dr. Doom, which started to have some things on it, they were still going, no, you got 6 weeks to make this game. We're like, fuck, we can't make a game, that fast. So all that stuff was going on, and Pat came in and basically said, we have to we have to do it, we have to make the other decision. We're going to throw the kitchen sink at this thing. We're going to make the coolest thing we can possibly make. We're going to make something crazy, a crazy toy, and that's what we're going to do. And then they realized how much it was going to cost to make that head and everything else that they wanted to put in the game, and they went, let's do a cheap version. So they put a cheap version on the original bill of materials. That's what we all built, and it wasn't until we got to the not the sample run, just to the 150 or whatever they were going to make. When they got to that line, and they'd already committed, they showed it at a show and everything. It's like we were making this game. We had people who were taking orders. Everybody was super excited about the game, and they got there and they went, "This thing it's going to break. Like, there's no way we can make this thing without it's going to break." And Pat goes, "Oh, John, didn't we have another design for that thing? Oh, yeah, here's one. We think this will work a little better in manufacturing." It was $65 more expensive. And Neil Nicasio was going, "You're fucking kidding me. You're going to make me spend," and there was nothing he could do. They totally had gotten it. They totally fucked it. They pushed it, they slipped it through, and the rest is history. So we have this crazy game, and that's how we kept on going. That's how we kept on finding some way to lure you guys all into still being interested. And, to this day, we're still kind of looking for that same magic. We're looking for something that somebody going, ooh, bitchin', right? We're looking for something where somebody goes, ooh, bitchin'. That's what we're after. And if like Funhouse, like Pinball, that it's a machine coming to life, if we do that, if we actually bring it to life, then we win. And it's a win-win for everybody. We all win. So that's my list. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, I'll ask the first question, as I said I would. Now, when we look at your list, there's a great preponderance of unlicensed themes, which of course gives you the total artistic freedom. When you think about the way games are done nowadays, with that LCD screen just begging for so much investment, or else, if you don't want to create all that video and audio, you get a movie and it's given to you. And if you have to work with a movie knowing that they're going to just use stuff from the movie on the video part, do you think that would make your job much less fun?
Less fun would not be the measurement that would concern me. It might be marginally less fun, but more we would spend our time doing a bunch of other stuff than writing music and making sound. We'd be spending time working with licensors, and we'd be spending time working with licensed partners trying to get approvals for stuff, and we would spend all this other time doing stuff that's, when you have to do that, that's actually kind of mostly what I spend my time. I spend a lot of time doing that stuff now, and those people are my partners, and we're making something together, and it's a thing that works. It's far, far less interesting as games than what I think that we ought to do. I mean, Pinball and Fishtails and Taxi and Black Knight, thank you, they're our IP. That's the IP that we made up. And it's not derivative, and it does have personality. It did come to life, and it's far, far cooler and far more worthy than to make a game about a movie or a game about a TV show or a band or anything else. It's not wrong to do it, and I get why Gary wants to do it every time. It's not, it wouldn't be my first choice. I'm not excited about it. I know how to do it, and I think I do a pretty good job of it, but it's not something that wakes me up at 3 o'clock in the morning going, I know what I'm going to do. So, yeah, it's a fair question. And the video monitor, anything that takes the player away from the flippers and the ball on the playfield is bad for pinball. That's all.
During the 80s, what hardware and software did you use when you developed or composed the music? And then at what point would you hear it on the Yamaha?
We used the hardware and software that we used was the hardware and software that we created that was in the game. So we had development environments that consisted of a pinball soundboard with a Yamaha chip on it, and some kind of emulator circuitry that ran the operating system, a version of the operating system that ran in the game, right? And we were able to fire sound calls at it just the way that a game would fire sound calls at it. What it was actually firing sound calls at was a little sort of like an interpreted program that interpreted the note lists that we created. The note lists were things that look a little bit like MIDI instructions, but we typed them in by hand. So I would say note C4, 6, and it would be a note at middle C for 6 ticks or beats or whatever, right? And so I just would sit there and just go note, 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 or copy, paste, subroutine. I found all kinds of, cheap shortcuts to creating massive long passages and things like that, or, you build in loops and things like that. We created parameter manipulation that are like MIDI continuous controller type things. We had a language for that we could do either in a segment that was asynchronous, or we could do it as just a move and put it inside of a loop and make things move. He once accused me of writing a million notes per nanosecond. But that's how, all the cool, like the little bubbly sound effects and fishtails and stuff like that, all of that stuff is just like dozens or hundreds of notes being fired off very quickly in a very sort of a specific kind of bubbly shape. And, it worked. It just worked. Yeah, is that the answer? Yeah.
You mean to tell me Whirlwind isn't on this list?
Well, I suppose I could have made a case that Whirlwind deserved an honorable mention, because certainly there was a lot of cool music in Whirlwind. There's no question about it. Probably the second greatest air guitar tune ever.
Yeah.
Lives in
Especially
Whirlwind.
with the second half of the main theme after you lock the first ball.
Well, yeah, that was also. I mean, there are many. Thanks so much for calling that out. I mean, it would have been hard it is hard to not credit all of the ones that we did, because having sort of just achieved a certain level of sort of skill with it, because it took a couple of games to sort of work out the kinks of how you wrote music for that chip. Once we sort of had the basic tool set, and Pinball was kind of the first one where we really had it down. From there on, we really just had fun, and any of the games, F-14 or Fire or Big Guns or Cyclone, oh my God, You know, I mean, any number of those games would have certainly qualified. Earthshaker, a wonderful, wonderful game. Diner, Police Force. Yeah, it was a great list. And Whirlwind actually had Whirlwind was one of those games that I was talking about before where Pat blew everything up with Funhouse. Whirlwind was a game he did just before that, and it was the last one, sort of the last and best of those, compress the schedule, make it less complicated, make it more straightforward, do the simplest thing. It was Bill Futzenreuter was the programmer, and he already had the whole game programmed like 90 to 98% level on day one of the project, because he had just so many templates. He'd done so many games and so many games. So we had this whole thing done, and all I had to do was just like fire assets at it. And so I sat in my office and just wrote like a banshee and cranked out massive amounts of stuff. And, you know, I'd write like 2 or 3 things in a day and send it up. And the first thing the next morning I would go up and they'd be in the game. They'd just be in the game. They would just appear, because that was how Bill worked. So that game, that development for that game went very, very quickly, almost so quickly that it's like not memorable. I mean, it was memorable. It was it's a tremendously cool game. The storm is coming, Ed Boon, right? Return to your homes. It was really cool stuff. But yeah, so I'm sorry it didn't make the list. Did you vote?
No, I didn't vote. I didn't know the thing was on there, but if I had known it was there, I would have voted for sure, but
Okay,
I
fair
tend to
enough.
miss a lot of things.
Fair enough.
But also, especially with how you seem to be so attached to like Pinball and bringing the game to life. I know you didn't do the sound for this game, but the Machine Bride of Pinball, the second game in that, what are your feelings on how Dan Forden did for that game?
I love his soundtrack for that game.
Yeah,
Just,
that's easily like one of my favorite pieces of anything on that sound chip I've ever heard.
yeah, Dan killed it. I actually started on that project, and Python and I had our biggest falling out over that project, and I had to back off of it. And I ended up doing Funhouse more or less at the same time. So, no real regrets, and also because of what Dan did for that game. He really did a wonderful job.
Yeah, I'm a musician myself, and I love to study the sound hardware that goes into the games, because I've been playing pinball since I was very small, so I love to study the hardware and the music that goes into all of that. So
Cool.
It's really interesting to see all of that.
I'm glad you made it. Glad you came, for sure.
Yeah, I'm glad to see you here too, presenting
Yeah.
these things.
Thank you very much.
Oh, behind you.
Are we stopping? Yeah, I guess it's time.
that
Yeah,
rush thing,
yeah.
make it
Cram it all
faster,
in, right?
cheaper.
Yeah, there it is. Right, exactly. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you very much.